hast favored, not the path of those who earn thine anger, nor of those who go astray.
Jazakallah. So, to formally begin the session, I would like to invite the face behind these series of webinars, the President of Center of Pakistan International Relations, Madam Amna Malik, to deliver her opening remarks of the session. Ma'am Amna Malik.
Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Worthy panelists, I'm really grateful that all of you are over here on this special day, because this is a day today we are very sad. And Center of Pakistan and International Relation, I would like to introduce about our center. It's a strategic think tank which is working on various global issues, and especially peace and security is something which is very close to our heart. We are working with Dr. Tassin for a very long period of time, and I think this is the right time to talk about Kashmir. Today is 5th August. 5th August marks one whole year of Moody's fascist revocation of Article 370, which we all know. Kashmir's special status, which may transform into attempts for charging demography of this internationally disputed territory. Prime Minister of Pakistan unveiled a new map, which includes Jammu and Kashmir as part of Pakistan. UN Security Council adopted several resolutions in 1948, 1950s onwards, mentioning a plebiscite should be held to determine the region's future. But unfortunately, Kashmiri humans are deprived of the human rights. COPAIR conducted and initiated global movement to highlight human rights violations in Kashmir. The government of Pakistan today observes Yom-e-Istihsal against India on 5th August. This is something which is about humanity, and I think we need to raise our voice for this noble cause. So without further delay, I shall begin with requesting the distinguished member of diplomatic community, Dr. Ilaf Hadi, who is the permanent mission of the Republic of Iraq to the United Nations. Mashallah, you have a 14 years of your diplomatic career. You worked in 3 diplomatic missions of Iraq, in Rome as the head of the Legal and Multilateral Affairs Division, in Prague as the Deputy Ambassador, and currently in United States of America. Dr. Ilaf Hadi will shed light on the role of international organizations in tackling challenges like Kashmir. So over to Dr. Ilaf Hadi.
Thank you very much for this great introduction. I'm really very glad and honored to be here today, participating in this seminar. And of course, special thanks to the Center of Pakistan and International Relations and to Dr. Amna Malik herself, of course, and to Dr. Tahsin Isar. And please take into consideration, like all ideas and thoughts will be represented today, will represent me, not the government of Iraq. And yeah, it's very sad to still discuss this issue for after a decades of injustices in Kashmir. I will start by highlighting the international organization, the role of international community, starting highlighting the light on international organization reporting atrocities in Kashmir. First, the 43-page report by the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for the Human Rights, which released on July 8, 2019, raises serious concerns about abuses by state security forces and armed groups in Kashmir. And the Indian government dismissed the report as a false and motivated narrative that ignored the core issue of cross-border terrorism. That's the argument of the Indian government, of course. The Pakistani government welcomed the report, and it's a sign of cooperation. And later, the OHCHR found that Indian security forces often use excessive force to respond to protests that began in July 2016, including continued use of bullet firing shotguns, which have caused a large number of civilian deaths and injuries. The report also decried the lack of justice for past abuses such as killing and forced displacement in Jammu and Kashmir, enforced or involuntary disappearances, and alike sexual violence. It expressed concern over new allegations of torture and deaths in custody. The United Nations Human Rights Office also said that India should amend its Public Safety Act, an administrative detention law that allows detention without charge or trial for up to 2 years. Now, despite international calls, the Indian administrative part of the majority Muslim region, known as Jammu and Kashmir, had its special status within the constitution revoked by the Indian government on 5th August 2019, placing it under tighter central control. Pakistan has argued that the move violates international law. The United Nations Secretary General made a statement in August 2019, recalls the 1972 Agreement on Bilateral Relations between India and Pakistan, also known as the Simla Agreement, which states that the final status of Jammu and Kashmir is to be settled by peaceful means, in accordance with the United Nations Charter, of course. The Security Council held a consultative meeting in August 2019 on this issue for the first time since 1965, when the resolution 211 had been issued and enforcing a ceasefire and calls on India and Pakistan to utilize all peaceful means towards a settlement to the political problem. Now, I would like also to shed some light on historical discourse of Security Council role in Kashmir crisis. I mean, the United Nations has long maintained an institutional presence in the contested area, divided by the so-called line of control. The United Nations Military Observer Group in India and Pakistan observes and reports on many ceasefire violations. Resolution 39 of Security Council established the United Nations Commission for India and Pakistan, UNCIP, on January 20, 1948. The UNCP established function was to investigate the fact that gave rise to the Kashmir dispute and to exercise any mediatory influence likely to smooth away difficulties, to carry out directions given by the Security Council, and to report on the progress of executing the advice and directions of the Security Council. Again, the Security Council also passed Resolution 47 in April 1949, which was and still remains the Security Council outline structure for recommended permanent solution. Resolution 47 set forth a two-part recommendation consisting of demilitarization and plebiscite. One reason for the Security Council, I would call it failure in bringing a permanent resolution to the Kashmir conflict, is the Council view of the conflict as political rather than legal. From the beginning, the Security Council framed the problem as primarily a political dispute rather than looking to a major legal underpinning of the dispute, the instrument of accession. Now, within this process, of course, one question should be highlighted, which is the right to self-determination, which is a vital component of Security Council resolution. On 5th January 1949, the United Nations Commission on India and Pakistan adopted the resolution that guarantees a free and fair plebiscite in Jammu and Kashmir to enable the Kashmiri people realize their right to self-determination. It was on January 5th, 1949, when the United Nations Security Council passed a resolution supporting the Kashmiri right to decide their future by themselves through United Nations-sponsored plebiscite. The legal situation of this issue is complex. Once it includes human rights abuses, political and legal disputes between two nuclear powers, and of course, these injustices and instability could be used and manipulated by terrorism. In other words, the case of Jammu and Kashmir represent a concern to the international peace and security. Now, I'd like to discuss this issue from a different angle, which is the theoretical background of political choices and moral obligations in John Rawls' treatises. John Rawls' theory of justice as fairness describe a society of free individuals holding equal basic rights and cooperating within an egalitarian economic system. His theory of political liberalism delineates the legitimate use of political power in a democracy and envisions how civic unity might endure despite the diversity of worldviews that free institutions allow. Thus, in reflecting equilibrium, one's specific political judgments supports one's more general political convictions. According to this principle, political power may only be used in ways that all individuals or citizens can reasonably be expected to endorse. Those coerced by law must be able to endorse the society's fundamental political arrangements freely, not because they are dominated or manipulated or kept uninformed. That's very important to understand that people should have the capacity to be an active partner. Reasonable citizens want to live in a society in which they can cooperate with their fellow citizens on terms that are acceptable to all. Reasonable citizens want, in short, to belong to a society where political power is legitimately used. Rawls' solution to such challenge is for political power to be exercised in accordance with a political conception of justice. The three most fundamental ideas that Rawls finds in the public political culture of a democratic society are that citizens are free and equal, and the society should be a fair system of cooperation. Now, Rawls holds that justice as fairness is the most egalitarian and also the most plausible interpretation of fundamental concepts of rights. Thus, individual does not need to be born into a rich or a poor family, female or male, or a member of a particular racial group, and so on. Citizens are not entitled to more of the benefits of social cooperation or to be favored by social institutions simply because of them. These guiding ideas of justice as fairness are given institutional form by two principles of justice. First, each person has right of equal basic liberties and rights. And second, fair quality of opportunity. Then all citizens should have the familiar basic rights and liberties of conscience, freedom of association, freedom of speech, and liberty of the person, the rights to vote, to hold public office, to be treated in accordance with the rule of law, and so on. The first principle accords these rights and liberties to all citizens equally. and citizens are free in being able to take responsibilities for planning their own lives. In other words, people have the right of choice to plan and run their private and political lives. Rawlsian citizen or individual are not only free and equal, they are also reasonable and rational. So, free and equal, according to Rawls, are privilege any individual should have, while reasonableness and rational, are duties. But these duties should be accomplished only if the individual have his own basic rights. So if the individual feels himself an active political partners, then of course he would feel himself, or he would act as reasonable and rational. Role citizen is not utopian, since the individual choices and thoughts are affected by the historical discourse and general conditions. It will be very difficult to have reasonable and rational individual if his or her basic rights are not met, including his cultural heritage and religious customs. In justice as fairness, Rawls calls this reasonableness the capacity for a sense of justice. Citizens are also rational because they have the capacity to pursue and revise their own view of what is valuable in human life. Rawls calls this the capacity for conception of the good. Now, this conception of rights and justice creates the original position, which is a fair situation in which each individual is represented as only a free and equal. The design of the original position models the ideas of freedom, equality, and fairness. Without the original position honored, we will never have a stable, prosperous society and sustainable peace. This is very important, since any violation from any side to the original agreements gives the right to the individual to pursue his political choices out of the current non-just context. If the individual feels he's not secured or treated with respect, he will eagerly mobilize to leave this environment. But Rawls' theories not only apply for individuals, since egalitarianism is a basic part of his treatise. Rawls argues restricting the political and religious liberties of a weak minority might endure the system, but threaten the existence of an original position of equality and fairness. And that the two principles, the society, basic institution, should guarantee a public basis for each individual's self-respect. To the end, three factors are indispensably important, which are: Constitution should recognize the two principles of justice. The legislative process should be reasonable and rational within the constitutional framework. The political, legal, and social conduct of officials should respect justice and fairness. To ensure fair opportunity, regardless of differences, the state must also fund high-quality education for all, must also guarantee both a basic minimum income and health care for them. Here, I would like to highlight the case of Kurdistan of Iraq as a lesson learned or past experiences. We may all know that Kurds suffered of atrocities perpetrated by Saddam's dictator regime. Not only Kurds, I mean, all Iraqis were suffered, but now I'm concentrating on the Kurds because it has some similarities with the Kashmiri case. There were along other components of Iraqi society victims of Saddam's vicious behavior. In the light of popular uprising in 1991, United Nations Security Council Resolution 688 adopted on 5th April 1991, expressing concern over political repression of the Iraqi people, including those in Iraqi Kurdistan. The Council condemned the repression and demanding that Iraq, as a contribution to removing the threat to international peace and security, end the repression and respect the human rights of its population. The Council insisted that Iraq allow access by international humanitarian organization to the areas affected, requesting the Secretary General to report on the Iraqi and Kurdish populations affected by repression from the Iraqi atrocities, including Kurdish populations affected by repression from the Iraqi authorities. Using all resources possible to address the needs of the population. To this end, Iraq and United Nations signed an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, to distribute hundreds of UN guards in the north of Iraq. France, United Kingdom, and the United States of America used Resolution 688 to establish Iraqi no-fly zones to protect humanitarian operations in Iraq, though the resolution made no explicit reference to no-fly zones. This experience of Security Council was unique, i.e. the first, by interfering in domestic issues to protect human rights. The Security Council, for the first time, recognized human rights violation as threat to international peace and security. It has important consequences on the future of Iraq, especially in the aftermath of US invasion in 2003. The political leaders in Baghdad and Erbil made it clear to preserve Iraqi unity in 2003, and they worked hand in hand to craft a new constitution that promotes democracy and human rights. But unfortunately, despite the successful steps of democracy in Iraq, Kurdistan of Iraq leaders decided to organize a referendum of independence in 2017. Here, I would like to recognize referendum crisis as a crisis of confidence. This situation arose and accumulated due to the political failure that combined the behavior of the political elite. However, the most important reason conducive to the referendum was due to the failure to establish a just social order based on a stable political process, which honors the constitutional democracy. The political elite failed to tackle the sectarian quota system that paralyzed the reform movement, and the whole process was drawn into a game of accusations, especially on successive security failures. The Constitution, which is supposed to be a protector of democracy and the rights of the people, has turned into a great burden on the shoulders of the political process. For instance, Article 140, paragraph 2, which imposes responsibility on the executive authority to take measures to ensure normalization and statistics, and ends with a referendum in Kirkuk and other disputed areas to determine the political choice of the citizens. The delay in implementing the constitution and the failure of the two parties to find, Baghdad and Erbil, to find a sound constitutional structural formula for the relationship led to illegal unilateral action represented in the referendum. This matter does not apply to the relationship between the Kurds and the Arabs only, but rather expands to include the relationship between individuals and groups in general, whether on the political or social level. However, despite the elements of political turmoil in Iraq, the Security Council, through direct and decisive intervention in 1991, has guaranteed special political status for Kurdistan of Iraq, into which at least the minimum standards of Kurds' rights could be met successfully. This kind of role was not the title of the discussion. International community which has not tackled the issue of essential rights of Kashmir people. The last Security Council meeting was held in 1965 to discuss the political exit of Kashmir crisis. Speaking at an international conference on refugees in February, Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan welcomed the comments and called on the United Nations to do more to intervene over the issue of Kashmir. I quote, "If the United Nations does not play its part, this could become one of the flashpoints in the world," he said at an event where he spoke alongside the United Nations chief. Not to alarm you, but prevention is better than cure. To this end, Secretary General called for the implementation of United Nations Security Council resolution on Kashmir, which dates back to 1948, calling for a plebiscite to be held among Kashmiri residents on whether they would join India or Pakistan. Discussion over the role of international organizations in tackling challenges sheds light on Rawls' law of peoples. Rawls believes that non-democratic and unstable society consists of unhappy individuals. And this situation, conducted by fundamentalism and interpretation of what is right, which forcibly imposed on others. This situation has regional and international consequences, especially among overlapped peoples. Rawls described the main ideas motivating his law of peoples as follows. Two main ideas motivate law of peoples. One is that the great evils of human history, like unjust war and oppression, religious persecution, and the denial of liberty of conscience, follow from political injustice, with its own cruelties and callousness. The other main idea, obviously, connected with the first, is that once the gravest forms of political injustice are eliminated by following just, or at least decent social policies and establishing just, or at least decent, basic institutions, these great evils will eventually disappear. The most important feature of the realistic utopia that Rawls emphasized in the law of peoples is that the great evils of human history no longer occur if all societies are internally well ordered and justice is honored. In other words, to build stable international order, the people's rights should be met, since injustices create atrocities and lead to chaos. As a liberal society or a decent society has a basic structure institutions, so Rawls says there is an international basic structure. The rules of this basic structure are coercively enforced. The principles that should regulate this international basic structures thus required justification. The justification of these principles must accommodate the fact that there is even more pluralism in worldviews among contemporary societies than there is within a single society. Rawls put forward 8 principles for ordering the international basic structure, which is people are free, independent, equal, or parties to the agreements that bind them, observe the duty of non-intervention, except to address grave violations of human rights, have a right of self-defense, to honor human rights, and have a duty to assist other peoples. Thus, Rawls also leaves room for his law of peoples to accommodate various organizations that may help societies to increase their political and economic coordination and ensure justice. The actors in Rawls' international theory are not individuals, but societies. He called peoples. Peoples see themselves as free in the sense of being rightfully politically independent and as equal in regarding themselves as equally deserving of recognition and respect. Peoples are reasonable in that they will honor fair terms of cooperation. Indeed, public reason imposes duties of civility upon the members of international society. Government officials should avoid reliance on contentious, parochial reasons that all peoples cannot reasonably share. One major reason that liberal peoples tolerate decent peoples, Rawls says, is that these decent peoples secure for all persons within their territory a core list of human rights. Rawls claims that the parties in the international ordinal position would favor equality and independence. The stability of the international political order will thus be stability for the right reasons. Now, I would like to share some recommendations. The first is that the problem will resolved by the stakeholders, should be resolved by the stakeholders, all stakeholders. Then, if they will not find the resolution, then the doors might be open to foreign interventions. And that's very dangerous to the local people of Jammu and Kashmir. Second, justice shall be always the core of any political steps in Kashmir, conducted in Kashmir. Political choices of Kashmiri people should be taken into consideration. The second step should be pursue stability to promote developments and justice. People should have the right to determine their future. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. Ilaf Hadi. You covered very well the role of international organizations on Kashmir issue, like UNHCR raises serious concern about abuses of Indian forces in Kashmir, like pellet firing and other abuses. And you also mentioned that the 5th August move of India violates international law. Then UN Security General also emphasized the peaceful settlement according to UN Charter. Then your Rawls concept of civil rights and recommendations are really a question that what kind of democracy is India, that the political power use on the innocent community, how they are misusing it, and how we can coordinate it with the Kurds example for the settlement of the Kashmir issue. So these are all concern for the international community, because it can result into make Kashmir a flashpoint. It can be a threat to nuclearization of the region. And finally, you gave very important recommendations that the stakeholder should be involved, or there should be a proper justice system in which when we are talking about India as a confederation, so they need to keep on board and endorse the all communities and work for their development and justice and other rights, civil rights. And finally, you mentioned that if we are not considering or undervalue all these things and not settle this Kashmir issue, then there is a threat to nuclearization of the region. So thank you very much, Dr. Laf Hadi. Now I request my panelist, and I would like to welcome Dr. Ambassador Khalid Mahmood Saab, who is here, who is also our advisor of Center of Pakistan and International Relation, and is also chairing the Institute of Strategic Studies, which is the leading Foreign Office Institute. So I request Dr. Tessin and other panelists if they have any question regarding the research of Dr. Laf Hadi. Please, Doctor. Please unmute.
May I pose a question?
Ambassador Khalid Mahmood would like to ask a question. Ji Khalid Saab, ji, welcome.
Dr. Ilaf, you have very comprehensively dealt with this subject. My question is that there is a concept in vogue now internationally of the responsibility to protect. That is, the international community has the right to intervene in a territory where the authority there is either unwilling or unable to protect the rights of the people there. Do you think that principle of responsibility to protect is applicable to the Indian illegally occupied Kashmir? And secondly, if so, what is the way to go about, what is the procedure to invoke that responsibility to protect doctrine? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. It's really very serious and sensitive question, since it represents the core of international structure and order. Why this international order exists? That's to ensure peace and security. If the international structure could not meet these aims in a proper way, then of course we will find atrocities and chaos spread in different places, not only in Kashmir and in different areas as well. I highlighted one experience concerning the responsibility to protect in the north of Iraq, in Kurdistan of Iraq in 1991, when the international community decided to intervene very urgently to protect the people of Iraq from the depression of and the excessive use of power of illegitimate use of power of Saddam Hussein dictator regime. Yeah, it's very important to understand that Security Council or United Nations in general worked by not only legal frames. Ambassador, of course, you know that better than us. There are so many other factors work together and enforce some trends in the international community, and of course within the United Nations, as well, and Security Council part of it. Power game is one of these factors, and of course the fear of the consequences of any intervention. We cannot forget that India and Pakistan are nuclear powers. They are very important to the international community. They are very important to the fight against terrorism. And that's why, for the international community, I'm saying, that's why any member state of the international community will think twice before taking any decision to go to that area and unilaterally decide to intervene. That will be very dangerous if the stakeholders will not approve such step. But at the same time, I'm not saying that international community should not do anything. No, they have to. They have to put much pressure on the stakeholders, whether on India or any other parties, to decide to find the best way to secure the Kashmiri rights. That's the most important things, human rights of the Kashmiri people. We don't want to see any abuses. And the other question, if was the best way, I think, Ambassador.
Yeah, but the procedure to invoke this responsibility to protect principle.
You know, if we are talking about the Charter of the United Nations and talking about the internal internal system of Security Council, of course, this kind of problems and crisis should be discussed within the Security Council. And of course, the P5 are essential, are very in the core of this process. We need, now the Security Council, I was there last year in August. I attended the, when the Security Council discussed the issue of Kashmir. At that time, we understood that it's very sensitive issue for the Security Council, but at the same time, they don't want to take any step that would make the things worse. They want to keep the essential, the current structure the Security Council already highlighted or outlined since 1948. If the Security Council really wants to go forward, one of the B5 should ask for it. Should ask for a new discussions, for a new meetings, for a new solutions. For one reason, which is for organizing the plebiscite. The plebiscite is the most important step that should be taken. One would tell me, okay, you are an Iraqi, you have the case of Kurdistan of Iraq, you as Iraqi government refused the referendum of Kurdish people in 2017, but that was different. The situation now in Kurdistan of Iraq is different than the situation in 1991. In so many ways, whether legal, political, or security ways. Whether the situation in Kashmir has not had any progress. So that's what I believe. That's what I can see. It's very difficult, but it's not possible. The stakeholders should, the first thing, stakeholders should sit on one table, should discuss, the discussion should include also local people, representatives of local people, and of course they should find a way to respect their rights, respect their participation and their political choice.
What happens if one of the major party does not want to sit to talk about this matter?
That's the problem.
That's the problem, actually.
That's the problem. If one of the parties refuses to sit and discuss, and of course the problem will still standing.
So and the international community has to act then.
Yes, it's like a circle. It's like a circle, but in one way, one step of the series should be broken. So we have to find once from the P5 to ask for breaking this ice. I think this is how maybe it's very difficult. The other party refuses, might not listen also to one of the P5, since maybe find themselves a major power, not only on regional basis, but as an international power. But believe me, I do believe that this crisis will not be resolved without a dialogue and discussion. So peaceful settlements is the only solution, no matter how, and the people of Kashmir will never abandon their rights. That's any power, any political power should understand that people will never abandon their rights. whether today or after decades, they will have to sit and discuss whether with Pakistan or with the Kashmiri people to find the best way to resolve this crisis.
As time is short, so should we move to next panelist, Dr. Tessin, or there is a question?
I had actually a question for Ilaf.
Yeah, sure. Please make it short, Ilaf.
Of course.
Okay, all right. Ilaf, thank you very much, first of all, for your presentation. And you tried to also inculcate some parts of liberal political, theoretical perspective in it, from the perspective of political liberalism, that is to say, Rawlsian idea about justice and fair play and justice as fairness. I would like to ask you as to how the idea of the law of the people as envisaged by Rawls could be actually, translated into the rights of the Kashmiri people. When on the one hand, you have a case of democracy, such as that of India, a sham democracy, which is full of contradiction, which is not respecting its constitution, which is not respecting the rights of its citizens, not only in Kashmir, but many other places in India itself. So where do we find this concept of political liberalism as envisaged by John Rawls fitting into this context of rights and violation of basic human freedoms in Kashmir? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Tessin. Is a very important question. Two ideas or two essential ideas Rawls tried to highlight in his Law of Peoples. The first is the human rights, the people's rights, political choices of the people, and the second is that stability in the international society. And these two will not be met if we don't have a shared responsibility by all members of the international community. So cooperation among countries, he called them societies, peoples, not countries, because he believes that political settlements, political powers should be legitimately, legally representing the people. That's why he's going to the source. He's talking that peoples should cooperate. In the case of Kashmir, yes, it's a shared responsibility. It's a shared responsibility by not only Indians or Pakistanis. It's the responsibility of the international community to find the way and respect the peoples of Kashmiri people, the rights of the Kashmiri people. It's in the Law of Peoples, he tried to say that, okay, for the liberal society, because he understands that international society consists of different kind of peoples, different historical backgrounds, different cultural and religious backgrounds. So how people from different backgrounds can sit together and talk and find the best way of cooperation by legitimacy, by legitimate representatives. That's how he believes the Law of Peoples. Whether we like it or not, not all international community finds the political institution or establishment in India democratic or non-democratic. That's the problem. We don't have a one vision to one problems. We have different visions to one problem. And we cannot find the best way to discuss what's the best way of having a mutual understanding to this problem. That's how I would, stability, human rights, and cooperation are the essential, let's say, pillars of Law of Peoples. Thank you. Thank you
very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lafadi. Now, our next speaker of the session is Dr. Tessin Nisar, who is a research analyst and academic expert. She is a PhD in political science associated with the Center for Ethics and Global Politics Department of Political Science, Rome, Italy. She's also a research fellow and board of advisors, South Asia Democratic Forum, Brussels, Belgium. Dr. Taseen Nisar has written extensively on human rights violations in Kashmir, and today she will reflect on the topic Deserted Civil Rights Entitlements of Kashmiri People. Over to Dr. Taseen Nisar.
Thank you very much, Kamna. Heartiest thanks to you and your center who have given me this opportunity to contribute my research as far as our topic is concerned, that is a violation of human rights in Kashmir, glancing through the humanitarian prism. In order to start off with this particular topic, which is extremely important, now today that we mark the first anniversary of revocation of Article 370 and 35A back in 2019. It's been a year, and Kashmir remains in a lockdown. So my preliminary research that I conducted as part of my PhD thesis was on colonial and post-colonial narratives to understand post-colonial societies such as that of Pakistan and India. And to my utmost knowledge that I can apply to this particular topic is that in order to understand a little bit of historical background into the issue of Kashmir and rights violation here, we have to really look into the colonial dimension, because if we just bypass the colonial dimension, I'm afraid we will be really risking a lot. So the way to look forward towards understanding the root cause of this, discrepancy, which is done by India within, constitutional revocation, is to look at post-colonial India as a colonizing power. So what is it doing with regard to Kashmir has to do very much of the post-colonial legacy that India is actually, exercising. And with this, I would just try to a little bit apply the perspective of post-colonial theory, because I think that theory making contributes a lot in the field of social sciences, and particularly in the field of international relations. So I would be a little bit more interested in sort of, looking at the post-colonial theoretical dimension into understanding of the nature of this issue. I would also like to talk a little bit about how Elaf illustrated in terms of how the Rawlsian theory into political liberalism would envisage rights debate in Kashmir. And then, of course, from liberal perspective, liberal left perspective, as enunciated by 20th century writers and philosophers like Antonio Gramsci, who talks about the idea of hegemony, who is a hegemon, and the idea of counter-hegemony, how the hegemon is able to actually use coercive power, or use the element of violence and force to sort of practice these kind of political imagination, and the way in which a counter narrative to it in terms of how counter hegemony is developed in the process of it. So I see this also within the neo-Gramscian idea of subaltern studies, which is also part of post-colonial studies literature. And then I see like the idea of Indian hegemony as post-colonial colonization, and counter-hegemony as what we see in Kashmir as a social movement, a movement of national self-liberation and that of self-determination of Kashmiris. Then, of course, I would also be interested in looking at it from the paradigm of Edward Said, who is a half Palestinian, half American political theorist. And Edward Said's theory about the idea of giving a European and a non-European narrative to understand nature of post-colonial societies is important, because the idea of colonization of South Asia, the idea of this kind of demarcation between how the colonial powers actually brought in their institutions, and in our case, the British, how they demarcated the borders, how they just, did the cartography, how in this case where, Cyril Redcliffe actually distributed the territorial units in a very hastily fashion. So I think that a little bit perspective into political theory and post-colonial theoretical perspective. Then, of course, my entire focus rests on finding a ground to understand the rights debate on Kashmir within a very moral and legal, philosophical angle. And in this, I also inculcate again John Rawls' idea about the law of the people, which Rawls illustrate as some general principles that could be accepted by both liberal and non-liberal society for regulating their behavior towards each other. It is Rawls' most detailed account of how a modern constitutional democracy could be viewed legitimate by reasonable citizens, who on religious, philosophical, or religious ground do not accept a liberal, comprehensive doctrine. So, what do we actually infer from it? That based on such an assumption, a democracy like that of India, can it really ensure what it fulfills or not? Or to what extent it is able to cater to the needs of its own citizens. Now, if we look at some of the human rights declarations that have been proclaimed by the Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights law, which states that everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, impart information and ideas through any media, regardless of frontiers. In order to discuss briefly about what constitutes civil rights and civil liberties, I will try to give a brief view of these concepts. What do we mean by civil rights? So Encyclopedia Britannica defines civil rights as: civil rights are guarantees of equal social opportunities and equal protection under the law, regardless of race, religion, or other personal characteristics. Example of civil rights include the right to vote, the right to a fair trial, the right to government services, the right to a public education, and the right to use public facilities. Civil rights are an essential component of democracy. When individuals are being denied opportunities to participate in political society, they are being denied their civil rights. Civil rights and political rights form the original and main part of international humanitarian rights. According to the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights, economic, social, and cultural rights comprise the first generational rights. While civil rights are defined above, it is also important to discuss the concept of civil liberties. Civil liberties may include the freedom of conscience, freedom of press, freedom of religion, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, the right to security and liberty, freedom of speech, the right to privacy, the right to equal treatment under the law and due process, the right to a fair trial, and the right to life. Other civil liberties include the right to own property, the right to defend oneself, and the right to bodily integrity. India and its track record of fundamental rights. In the case of India, the fundamental rights embodied in Part 3 of the Indian Constitution guarantee liberties, such as all Indians can lead their lives in peace as citizens of India. And the 6 fundamental rights are right to equality, right to freedom, the right against exploitation, the right to freedom of religion, cultural and educational rights, and a right to constitutional remedies. Now, a contradiction to its own constitution when India actually proclaimed Article 370 and 35A, that we are able to say that there are severe lacunas that exist in Article 14 of the Indian Constitution on the question of protection and security of its citizens against any infringement of freedom of speech, right of speech, and freedom of assembly, as the case of Kashmir evidently shows. And one case in point is the AFSPA, the Armed Forces Special Power Act, which has been imposed in Kashmir since 1990. The act renders emergency powers in disturbed areas and is a carte blanche to Indian border security and armed forces to murder, assault, use force, torture, inflict severe violence, and arrest without a warrant. Till date, no Indian Army officer is prosecuted for their heinous crimes in Kashmir. By promulgating such acts, India is clearly violating Article 4, 6, and 7 of International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, as well as Article 3 of the 4th Geneva Convention, by squashing Kashmiris of the right to life, using torture, sexual violence, massacres, extrajudicial killings, disappearances, and mass graves. India's abrogation of Article 370 and 35A in Kashmir is a loud reminder that far from practicing its own constitution, it has violated norms of international law. On 5th August 2019, India belligerently took over the disputed and autonomous region of Kashmir, stripping off its autonomy by merging with the Union territory. The legal fraternity in India called it extra-constitutional, fraudulent, and illegal, barring the Jammu and Kashmir Assembly, making it entirely dysfunctional and abrogating it altogether. Article 370 of the Indian Constitution gives special status to Jammu and Kashmir, allowing it to have a separate constitution, a state flag, and autonomy over internal administration of the state. This article, along with Article 35A, defined that the Jammu and Kashmir state's residents live under a separate set of laws, including those related to citizenship, ownership of property, and fundamental rights as compared to residents of the other Indian states. As a result of this provision, Indian citizens from other states could not purchase land or property in Jammu and Kashmir. It is important also to see Article 370 in the light of Clause 7 of the Instrument of Accession signed by Maharaja Hari Singh that declared that the state could not be compelled to accept any future constitution of India. The state was within its right to draft its own constitution and to decide for itself what additional powers to extend to the central government. Article 370 was designed to protect those rights, actually. According to the constitutional scholar A.G. Noorani, Article 370 records a solemn compact. Neither India nor the state can unilaterally amend or abrogate it. Internal discontent with Article 370 grew like wildfire. P. Chidambaram, a senior leader in the opposition Congress party, described the decision as a catastrophic step. Many legal experts in India saw the move as extra-constitutional and opined that the central government was in blatant violation of Instrument of Accession and that it cannot arbitrarily downgrade the status of state of the Union territory. Therefore, the argument surrounding the justification for the illegality of Article 370 is that if the act or the status of the state of Instrument of Accession was not acceptable, then why was it allowed to be part of the Indian Constitution for unexplainable years? This is a violation of the fundamental rights of the state and its people. This act is without justification of any legal, economic, or political grounds, which alone attracts violation of the constitutional rights and invites judicial review of the Supreme Court, that is the Indian Supreme Court. Pakistan, in its capacity, was quick to respond to India's move in Kashmir as illegitimate, illegal, and denounced that it was an internal matter of India. Pakistan believes that Kashmir is a disputed area and that under the United Nations resolution, Kashmiris be given the right of national self-determination and that no unilateral action in Kashmir should be acceptable to Pakistan. Furthermore, Pakistan believes that Kashmir is the unfinished agenda of partition and that any change in the territorial status of Kashmir is an infringement on its demography and a violation of territorial jurisdiction by India. Pakistan justifies that India made an illegal and unilateral attempt to hijack Kashmir by revocation of Article 370 and 35A. In this respect, according to Pakistan, the issue of conflictual status of Jammu and Kashmir is recognized by the United Nations Charter and especially the international community. In line with Pakistan's call to urge the international community to stick to United Nations resolution on Kashmir, the United Nations General Assembly was called to address this issue. After nearly 55 years, Pakistan's efforts were claimed as a diplomatic victory, for it was successful to convene the United Nations meeting with the good offices of China. And then Kashmir was again on the UN agenda in spite of the Indian reluctance to bring it to the UN forum. Pakistan remained firm and focused in its policy on Kashmir and asserted that it is not the internal matter of India. It is a matter of world peace and security, which has come under the debate within the UN ambit after 1965. Narendra Modi and his fascist policies have set the precedent for a mass-scale ethnic cleansing and even a probability of a genocide, considering the possibility that the region will become majoritarian Hindu, ripping off Kashmiris from their Muslim majoritarian status. With Article 370 gone, Kashmiris would not be able to exercise the right to own a property. As a result, will lose the right of inheritance of land and kinship. In other words, Kashmiris, like the Palestinians, will be deprived of the land which they once owned, and thus resulting in their marginalization, ghettoization in political, economic, and social domains. India deployed 900,000 troops, one of the largest deployment of its military contingents ever in Kashmir, blocked and banned all communication links, incarcerated and detained the political leadership of Kashmir, imposed unlimited curfew, curbed the basic human rights of millions of people in Kashmir by making it one of the largest human prisons of the world. At its worst, schools, colleges, universities, and all seats of learning were closed. Hospitals recording extreme emergency with severe limitations of medical supplies, maternity wards having almost absent mid-nurses, casualty wards having next to zero rescue staffs. The world watched the most hapless scenes of how one of the biggest democracies kept its population at hostage. Of late, India has suffered the largest decline in its political rights and civil liberties record. In its 2020 report published by pro-democracy nonprofit Freedom House, based in Washington, D.C., gives a damning assessment of Modi's government's pattern of Hindu nationalist policies, including the persecution of religious minorities, abruptly revoking Jammu and Kashmir's autonomy, the adoption of the Citizenship Amendment Act, CAA or CAB, which it calls a discriminatory citizenship law, and the aggressive suppression of the anti-CAA protests that followed eventually. India has come under sharp international pressure following Modi government's revocation of J&K's special constitutional status and the passage of the Citizenship Amendment Act, which critics say make religion the basis of granting Indian citizenship and discriminate against the Muslims. Rights organizations have also raised vociferous criticism against India. The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, filed an application before India's Supreme Court asking that the United Nations be made a third party in the petition that has been filed against the Citizenship Amendment Act. Moreover, Antonio Guterres defended the right of self-determination of Kashmiris under international law and promised that the right of self-determination of Kashmiris should be protected. He was the first Secretary General of the UN to talk freely on Kashmir till date. While Kashmir remains in a lockdown, there is a great desire of the people of Kashmir in the liberation movement. The spirit of the people of Kashmir remain high and resolute. No one can deny them the freedom from the barbaric Indian occupation. It is a grim reality, nevertheless, that more Indians are living abroad in shame as never before. When the famous Indian author and writer Amartya Sen wrote his book, The Argumentative Indian, it was believed that Indians put reason and argument behind any social discourse. But the new face of the reality is that today many Indians in the West became apologetic and least argumentative for the follies of their own government. Scholars and writers like Amartya Sen himself opposed the Bharatiya Janata Party, the BJP, directly, saying that he criticizes the government and said that as an Indian, I am not proud of the fact that India, after having done so much to achieve a democratic norm in the world, where India was the first non-democratic country to go for democracy, that we lose that reputation on the grounds of action that have been taken. He regarded the detention of Kashmiri political leaders as a classical colonial excuse, something that I was also discussing about, to prevent backlash against the Indian government's decision, and called for a democratic solution that would involve the Kashmiri people, the will of the Kashmiri people. Arundhati Roy, a famous Indian activist and celebrated writer, while addressing huge crowds in the United States, commented on the fate of the Kashmiris as saying that Indian Muslims have been effectively disenfranchised and are becoming that most vulnerable of people, a community without political representation and without a voice. Various forms of undeclared social boycotts are pushing them down the socio-economic ladder, and for reasons of physical security, into ghettos. Indian Muslims have also lost their place in the mainstream Indian media. A conquest, a colonial annexation, another triumph for Hindu nation was being celebrated. Once again, the conqueror's eyes fell upon the two primal trophies of conquest, women and land. Statements by senior BJP politicians in patriotic pop videos that notched up millions of videos legitimized this indecency. Google Trends showed a surge in searches, marry a Kashmiri girl and buy land in Kashmir. The face of Indian Confederation actually is bare naked today. Through the illegal annexation of Kashmir, NRC, the National Registration of Citizens, and the CAA, the Citizenship Amendment Act, there is an uproar and social and political discontentment across the country. The country has, in fact, fragmented along the political and religious lines. Separatist movements are gaining strength in Mizoram, Tripura, and Nagaland. The general impression and the ground reality, in fact, is that the RSS has saffronized India, its institutions, its military, its educational institutions, even its armed forces. In educational institutions, there is a deep rift as the BJP tries to exploit the religious card. In Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi, a Kashmiri student was attacked and the Hindu Mahasabha applauded that. The ideology of Hindutva is decapacitating the Indian state. Conclusion. So where do we go from here? Democracy in India has been a hostage to the ideological narrative of the BJP that plans to create the Hindu Rashtra or Hindu Reich. India is today passing from a deep worsening of the idea of freedom, right, and its appeal globally is diminishing very sharply. Modi's actions in Kashmir is tantamount to a genocide, where millions of Kashmiris are put to complete lockdown with no connectivity whatsoever with the outside world. As the situation of violations of human rights gets worse, alas, the world should no longer be mum over the huge brutality perpetrated on Kashmiris, and time has come to demand the criminal prosecution against Narendra Modi, such as what was also suggested by our Prime Minister Imran Khan in his United Nations General Assembly speech, along with his Saffron Brigade. And the debate is that if Slobodan Milosevic could be actually prosecuted within the International Criminal Court, then why can't be Modi? Kashmiris are fighting their own indigenous struggle and there is no backing off for them. It's time for India to realize that the floodgates of doom are near, as what happens in Kashmir will be a reflection, the horror that could actually unleash in its most restive parts. And in the end, I would like to just present one of the dedications that I have written on Kashmir, which goes like, Kashmir, oh Kashmir, we know that you are long aggrieved. We know that your agony is nerve-wracking. Our hearts sigh with pain and sorrow. Our deepest, utmost desire is to see you free. The freedom that is your destiny, the freedom that is your freedom. Your resolve, your acute blistering wounds, your aspirations shall never ever go in vain. Those that tread you on the gates of hell, those that agonized, traumatized, brutalized you shall one day be bent in shame. Those that unleashed horrors on your sacred land shall redeem with their knees bent in repentance. Your cry, your deepest wish for liberation will bear fruit one day, inshallah. The day of your resurrection is not far. Your yearnings for your lost glory, your magnificent dominion shall resuscitate on the beloved land of Kashmir. Your people, you epitomize your honor. Your heads shall stand in honoring every drop of blood. Every single sigh, every single scream of terror shall, inshallah, be recompensed. The day is not far when your lush green valleys, your lakes, your mountains retain the exuberance of heavens. Kashmir, oh Kashmir, you are just very near to be back as the paradise gained. Kashmir, oh Kashmir, yes, your land shall resonate hope amidst hopelessness. Thank you.
Very nice, Dr. Tessin. I can see you speak out from your heart. I think you feel the pain of the Kashmiri women, and I appreciate that. And you well said that democracy in India is at hostage. World should speak out. And this is the time that world should speak out. Kashmiri agony will never go in vain. You're absolutely right. The day of resurrection is no longer far away. So you discussed the root cause of constitutional revocation is the act or part of post-colonial theory. You also criticized BJP Hindutva ideology and implementation of a new colonial annexation to be claimed as a success for the Hindu nation. Hegemon use coercive power. You absolutely said right. You also mentioned the Edwards theory, and you also discussed the Rawls ideas of a law of people. That's absolutely right, that civil rights are essential component of democracy, and you also highlight the concept of civil liberties, and you also talked about that India is denying the fundamental rights to Kashmir, and you also highlight Geneva Convention, but India is not following the norms of international law, and this is true. And we need to highlight that why this hegemon is not following the international law and why they are violating the human rights issues. So one thing you mentioned absolutely right, that the diplomatic victory of Pakistan to bring Kashmir at UN forum is very important, that this issue needs to be discussed at the UN forum if we want to ensure the world peace. Kashmir right of self-determination is very important, as our previous speaker also mentioned about it. And lockdown in Kashmir is like a human prison of the world. And Kashmiris are the most vulnerable community, and you are absolutely right. And then you also mentioned that the people from Indian political side, from media, and many authors write papers, articles, and they criticize their own government for not following the Citizenship Act. And you also mentioned that this is not the part of the annexation, and if we carry on the Indian acts, so the Kashmiris will lose the right of their inheritance like Palestinians. So this is something like we are entering into the tech world, and Kashmiris are not having the access to connect to the world. So this is something really painful. And if anybody is having a question, I request them that we finish it. Is there any question from, or should we move to the next panelist?
Hello, salam alaikum. May peace be upon all of you. Yes, I have a question for Tessin. Thank you,
Yes, Barbara.
first of
Yes,
all,
please. Yes,
for
please.
your interesting topic. Just one question. Everything is related. We are living in a way in a global world, and there is now a new wave of populism that use false ideology, which is very dangerous for democracy. Islamophobia is a false narrative that is spread in many countries, European countries, even included Italy. How Europe, in your opinion, is using the card of religion to hide your own fears or weakness? Thank you.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Barbara, for this very interesting questions. There are many dimensions to answer the question. First of all, you just included the word or the terminology Islamophobia, and I think that our Prime Minister Imran Khan also, when he was presenting the case for Kashmir, he also used these words for the rise of Islamophobia in Europe and populist politics, which is merged or married with religious nationalism. So, unfortunately, today we see that even in Europe, there is a trend towards the marriage between the far right and that of nationalism. And this is an extremely dangerous trend because when we go back into the annals of the European history within the 1920s, we see that all sorts of a violation of human rights took place as a result of fascism and Nazism. And in fact, there are certain reflections of this kind of ideology on how today the BJP in India is using a combination of fascist ideologies and all sorts of religious right-wing extreme narratives. So the power of narratives in the European philosophical and social discourse is extremely important to be understood. And in terms of the rising wave of Islamophobia, I think that Europe should really also, through its softer ways of soft power diplomacy, it can really show the world that it is able to come out of such kind of very horrendous kind of concepts and application of these concepts, because European history has suffered a lot, has been victimized to this gamut of violence and terror in the name of religion, in the name of supremacy. So I think that there is a time to Europe to really see and to calculate the very nature of the populist policies, such as how you see in case of Germany, the far right in Germany is getting strong, far right in Austria is getting strong, far right in Italy is getting strong. So in order to prove its mantle and in order to sort of show a mirror to the rest of the world, Europe also has to set its record straight, has to really come to terms that it has to keep its house in order. The European Union is a perfect example. It is a normative power, something which I think we will also listen with the Professor Sant'Agostino's speech. We are really looking forward to that. So the kind of the normativity that we expect from Europe is really something which is exemplary. Thank you very much for your question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tessie. Should we move to our next panelist as time is short? Miss Barbara Gallo, she is a journalist and a graduate in sociology from the University of Rome. Her work is centered on the geopolitics of conflicts, and particularly in the area of the subcontinent. In the past, she had collaborated with UNICEF Italy in advocacy activities with the Geopolitico online newspaper and with an Italian NGO which operates in Afghanistan, India, and Italy, dealing specifically with the situation of women in Afghanistan. Ms. Barbara's area of expertise are as Asian continent and specifically the subcontinent conflict. So being an activist and a staunch supporter of women's rights, today she will share her thoughts on the subject of Kashmir as a cause of human rights violation. Please, Dr. Barbara.
Thank you.
We would like to hear your case study, please.
Good afternoon. I'm really thankful to have the chance to be here with you today and having the honor of sharing this interesting discussion among Pakistani people. I would thank to Amna Malek and Tazeen Nizar that gave me such an important opportunity. Today, my speech addressed my speech on some points about Kashmir situation and the human rights violation in that region. It has been 1 year since Kashmir remained in total lockdown. Narendra Modi, the flag carrier of the right-wing BJP, has caused an outright damage to the Indian secular tradition. Amit Shah, the Indian Interior Minister, announced the approval of the presidential decree revoking the autonomies to the areas of Jammu and Kashmir granted by Articles 370 and 35A of the Indian Constitution, thereby cancelling the autonomy of Kashmir and changing definitely the basic rights of the Kashmiri people. After the August 2019, the Kashmir was cut off from the rest of India with no access to media information, including internet and telecommunication. Furthermore, the COVID-19 emergencies added fuel to the fire because India government has used instrumentally the tragic consequences of the pandemic to justify acts of brutality and violence. Kashmir is the largest Muslim majority province in India, and the ongoing conflict in Jammu and Kashmir is the oldest unresolved conflict under United Nations. The Partition of Act established that the areas with the Muslim majority belong to Pakistan, while those with the Hindu majority to India. Contrary to the Act of Division, India occupied other Muslim majority areas such as Junagadh and Hyderabad. But going back to the partition time, the Muslims of the India subcontinent believed that the dream of separate Muslim state could turn their fortunes. And when Pakistan was born, the dream seems to be realized. But the partition opened many questions that still today there are not adequate political answers, because when it took place, this Muslim majority area did not become part of Pakistan, but on the contrary, became an unfinished agenda of the partition. Even since then, the constant acts of violence in Kashmir, which has effectively deprived the Muslim majority of the right to national self-determination, continue to be a crucial political knot between Pakistan and India. But the present India government has taken dangerous political initiatives that are causing these antagonists to grow even more. The Pulmana terrorist attack in February 14, 2019, and the Indian airstrike in Balakot some days later marks a dangerous new chapter in relations between the two countries. Peace supporters immediately asked to find diplomatic solution, while the war merchants were ready to exploit the situation. Many Indian media pushed to a narrative able to exacerbate rhetoric about war. And few months later, on the 5th of August, the Kashmir self-determination were removed, and the arrival of around 900,000 Indian military made the region the most militarized zone in the world. The articles I mentioned before allow the province to preserve its culture despite being in the center of the Hindu world. Their repeal deprived actually the Muslim population of many rights, and the clashes between military and civilians has provoked hundreds of deaths, and dozens of activists and politicians were arrested, increasing the risk of geopolitical instability in all regions. This lockdown targeted millions of people who are prisoners in their homes. From a certain point of view, we could compare Palestine and Gaza with Kashmir. India sees Kashmir as a Hindu territory that has been lost and should be taken back. De facto abrogation of the Article 35 is giving the possibility to create a settlement policy similar to Israel. But while the human rights abuses in conflicts like Palestine has garnered global attention, the same thing did not happen for Kashmiri people. Kashmir now is a place where children cannot go to school, people cannot go to work or walking freely in the streets. This means the end of human rights and humanity in a country which everyone was proud of their diversity tradition. The crackdown sparked international criticism. Angela Merkel, the German leader, officially said that the situation in Kashmir is not sustainable. And also United Nations has stressed the attention on the latest restriction imposed on Indian Minister Kashmir that will exacerbate the human rights situation. Moreover, the access to the area for foreign observers, including diplomats, humanitarian groups, and journalists, is strictly controlled. No reporters were allowed access to the area to follow the August 19 protests. Even now, foreign envoys are being given police escort, apparently for their own safety, and rarely obtain permission to travel outside the main city of Srinagar. India accuses Pakistan of training and sending militants across the border to launch a terroristic attack and fuel the growth of a separatist movement against Indian rule. India surely is trying to give a negative image of Pakistan at international level, but it could not succeed in its ambitions. In fact, Prime Minister Imran Khan condemned the New Delhi political choice, calling it contrary to the 1972 Shimla agreements, according to which the territorial dispute between the two states should have been resolved peacefully. Khan feared the risk of bloodbath and escalation of the conflict. For this reason, during the UN General Assembly, which took place in September 2019, the Pakistan Prime Minister warns of potential nuclear war over Kashmir. Moreover, he underlined the necessity of the UN intervention in order to avoid a war between Delhi and Islamabad, which would leave consequences not only for Pakistan and India, but also for the region and for the entire world. He urged an international forum to take action for solving Kashmir dispute, and most of all, for giving the people of Kashmir the right of self-determination, which is their fundamental right. While Islamabad clearly shows its concern about Kashmir situation, giving a positive sign to internationalize these issues, New Delhi has given another perspective, because India government considered the Kashmir situation an internal matter and between Pakistan and India only. Kashmir situation has always been complicated, but under Modi's presidency, things getting worse day by day. Now his Hindutva agenda is no more a secret. It contains elements of Russian supremacy, and the goal is pushing India into an authoritarian Hindu nationalist state. The Bharatiya Janata Party, currently in power in India, gained control of key government institutions. BJP was born from the ashes of Bharatiya Janata Sangh Party, an ultranational organization founded in 1951. The Ahmadabad revolt in Gujarat in 2002, it is an emblematic example of its ideology, and many political experts believe it was born out of the political will of the current Prime Minister of India. During the last election campaign, Modi has strategically chosen to increase war hysteria against Pakistan. The anti-Muslim and anti-minority feelings has reached a dangerous level in a country that has been always considered the largest democracy in the world. We even stress the attention on India's free press, which has always played a crucial role in protecting this country since its independence from Britain in 1947. Since Modi came to power in 2014, his government has tried to control the country's new media, and Indian journalists here now feel themselves under attack. According to Al Jazeera, 29 arrests of activists occurred in 2016, many of them in Kashmir. And after Burhan Wani killing, the 22-year-old commander of the separatist group of Kashmir, Hizbul Mujahideen, in July 8, 2016, there were protests for several months across Kashmir, in which over 100 civilians were killed and 12,000 people were injured. Now we have to put aside for a moment Kashmir situation and try to understand the success of a leader of an ultra-nationalist party, because it was the vote of non-Hindu Indians that allowed Modi to remain firmly in power. In 2014, few experts understood that India had opened the doors to populism. In reality, Modi popularity and success came from the invisible social class that no longer felt represented by the political elite of Congress, which is involved in corruption scandals, and now far from the needs of the people. Narendra Modi has turned his political attention towards those parts of the Indian population who live in the villages and or slums. These millions of people in need of any kind of assistance have heard for the first time after years a politician who turned directly to them, obtain at least part of them, toilets, electricity, gas connection, faster and easier access to bank loans. Furthermore, the political and military comparison with Pakistan manipulated by Modi before the start of the electoral race has been able to regain the hearts of millions of Indians by giving them back a long forgotten national pride. For the first time, millions of Indians of all ages, social and cultural groups have no longer felt beggars at the gates of so-called Western paradise, but citizens with rights and duties identical to those of the rest of the world. Going back to Kashmir human rights violation, children are surely those who are paying the highest price, and one of the direct impacts of large-scale militarization in Jammu and Kashmir has been on the education of children, as hundreds of schools were converted into military camps. The occupation of schools by armed forces creates a situation of insecurity and fear among students. The data reveals that children have also become victims of enforced disappearance by the hand of armed forces during the 3-decade-long armed conflict in Jammu and Kashmir. Kashmiri women are also victims, and threat of violence against them is rising, as well as rape, which is frequently used as a weapon. Nowadays, it's impossible to find a precise estimate about rapes and the number of widows and women whose husbands have been disappeared or killed by Indian forces. The paternalistic tones of Modi's rhetoric agenda show clearly the fundamentally misogynist side of BJP politics. Kashmiri women ended up at the center of the salvific mission of Modi government, described as unarmed victims of the Islamic patriarchate. Misogyny and paternalism are therefore non-incidental, but constitutive of the nationalist aspiration of the Modi government. The Indian women narrative as an act of liberation against Islamic oppression. This is often overlooked by political analysts. However, neglecting it means to do not understand as the control of women's bodies correspond to a specific project of nationalist Modi's agenda in order to weaken politically both people of Kashmir and Indian Muslims. But all Kashmir people are victims, and they have witnessed violation of human rights in the form of extrajudicial execution, injuries, illegal detention, torture, sexual violence, arson and vandalism of civil properties, restriction on religious activities, media gags, and ban on communication and internet services. The International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights prohibits torture and other forms of cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment. The government of India has ratified the ICCPR and the 4th Geneva Convention of 1949. The Article 3 of the Geneva Convention, which applies to internal conflicts, prohibits murder, torture, of no combats by both government and militant forces. The Armed Forces Special Powers Act, AFSPA, the law that grants special powers to security forces, is a major obstacle to the responsibility of the armed forces, as it provides effective immunity for human rights violation. Since the law entered into force in Kashmir in 1990, the Indian government has not allowed security forces to be prosecuted in civil courts for the crimes they committed, said Human Rights Watch. In 2018, UN Human Rights Commission publishing a report identifying many human rights abuses committed by India Army. But India strongly rejected the findings of the report, declaring it to be fallacious, prejudice, and violation of its sovereignty and territorial integrity. According to the data of Association of Parents of Disappeared Persons and Jammu Kashmir Coalition of Civil Society, a total of 4,000 people have been killed between 2008 and 2018 in Jammu and Kashmir. 1,070 were civilians, and more than 8,000 people have been subjected to enforced or involuntary disappearance since 1990. In July 2019, a report of UN High Commission of Human Rights underlined the concern about abuses in Kashmir. The report documented human rights violations by India's security forces, including extrajudicial killings, arbitrary detention, and forced disappearance. Even in this case, the Indian government dismissed the report as a false and motivated narrative that ignore the core issue of cross-border terrorism. The terrorist topic is always used by New Delhi to justify the attacks in Kashmir. In conclusion, India and Pakistan have opposite perspectives on Kashmir issues. Nowadays, the possibility of India-Pakistan dialogue is very difficult, considering the present political situation. The relation between the two countries had never been so tense for years, and modern narrative is deeply increasing the Hindu-Muslim antagonism. International media seem not to be interested in what is happening in Kashmir, undervaluing the risk of war in that region, which could have dramatic local and global consequences. The biggest danger is that a conventional war could escalate in a nuclear confrontation, and the military clash could be in Kashmir. Worldwide attention must remain on the atrocity and violation of human rights that people of Kashmir suffer every day, because what is happening in that region is no longer humanly tolerable. There is a need of the international community to recognize the severe threat of genocide and bloodbath once the curfew is lifted. In this context, Modi should be complicit of war crimes against his own population and be brought under the International Criminal Court. It also responsibility of the international community to acknowledge that the attention given to the plight of Kashmir people should get maximum possible coverage in the news media, both print and electronic. Civil societies, NGOs, and voices should be put their resources to gather the voices, both official and non-official, for support and solidarity with the Kashmiris before it will be too late. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Barbara. It's a very informative session, and you coined the term, the Modi's dangerous political initiatives. Yes, he's a racist, and if Modi's dangerous political initiatives will have the consequences of increasing resentment of people, and this means end of human rights and humanity. This is something very tragic, that there are missing people, innocent people are killed, women and children are abused, and the international media is silent. However, United Nations Secretary General emphasized on the maximum restraint and reiterating UN position to the Indian government, but somehow they are a bit stubborn. And you also mentioned about the deep concern about protection of human rights in the region. when foreign observers are restrained to visit the area, and due to the lockdown, we don't have the exact idea what's going on and what kind of other atrocities and civil rights are abused over there. You also emphasize that the international, and your major recommendation is that international community and media needs to consider this an important issue, a threat to the world peace, and rather than undervaluing this issue, then there is a risk of war in the region, as relations between the two countries are tense. Modi should be asked for trial in International Criminal Court of Justice for his human rights violation, and I totally agree with you. This is something which is very important to be done. So, any question for Miss Barbara? Very nice research work, ma'am. Any question?
Yes, thank you. If I may.
Please.
It's
Yes,
a pleasure. It's a pleasure, of course. Piacere che incontrare con Barbara. I do speak Italian because I was in Italy. I worked in Italy for 8 years, and it's always very grateful to meet Italian friends with their neutral and let's say vision to issues in the rest of the world. I mean, I will repeat your question to Tahsin. You asked her about European position towards cases like, Kashmir. From your point of view, what you would recommend to the Italian government if you will be in a position to do towards this case? Thank you.
Good answer. Yes, I would recommend it to Italian government to be more focused what is happening even out of European countries, because maybe sometimes we forget that what happened very far from where we live. It doesn't mean that it's something that don't touch all of them. The world is connected. Everything is connected because we live in a globalized world. So what's happening in Kashmir is something that can arrive till Italy, because we are in front of two nuclear countries, that we are playing a dangerous game in Kashmir. I am a journalist, and I'm honest that I would like to see more articles, more research, more movement by public opinion about Kashmir situation, because we do this, for example, for Palestine, for Gaza, but it's very difficult to find something about Kashmir. And since 2005, I studied the topic related to Pakistan, to India, to Kashmir. And so I know very well the situation. And we have to do more. Italian government have to go to the door of European Union and says something about Kashmir. Because it's important that the relation between the country, the whole European country, that do something against this tragedy, because it's a tragedy. Many people are dying. Many people are living in a horrible situation. We lived in Italy for 3 months in lockdown, and we thought that it was the end of the world. But if I compare this with the Kashmir people, it's nothing. It's nothing. So we have to do more action.
If I can ask another question.
Sure.
Thank you. Do you think that, I'm sorry to say, do you think European policy makers are ready to risk their relationship with India?
This is a question. This is a big question. This is the problem, because behind Kashmir, there are many big countries, such as China, India, and USA relation. That is the problem. You got the point, because people of Kashmir are the people that pay the highest price, but behind the decision of the European state and European Union, there are geopolitical strategy, and this is very difficult. This is the realpolitik, unfortunately.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Barbara. And now we are moving forward to Professor Dr. Angelo Santos Costino. Welcome, Professor. And he is the, I would like to introduce him. He is the Dean and chairing European Economic Integration at Beyazıt University, Ankara, since 2013. At the Faculty of Political Sciences, Department of Economics. Dr. Angelo is a seasoned scholar and social scientist, and we are looking forward to hear from him on human rights in Jammu and Kashmir, impressions and thoughts by a Europeanist. So welcome, Dr. Saab, and please carry on.
Good evening to all of you. I hope you are hearing me well. First of all,
would you like to share a screen? Would you like to share a screen so we can?
Yes, I have some slides.
Should we make you a co-host?
I hope you can see them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
okay. So, first of all, I want to thank Amna Malik for inviting me, and thank my dear friend and colleague Tehsin Nisar for inviting me to talk about the Kashmir issue. Well, then I would like to thank for indicating me as a very senior professor. It's the first time that I see such a indication. I think is sort of homage to my long career, and I hope to feel the expectation and saying something, let's say, interesting, because in the speech that I have heard up to now, so many of the things I wanted to say have already been said, but maybe this is, first of all, have been said better than I would have said. Second, this maybe would allow me to concentrate more on my view of the Kashmir issue as a Europeanist. Well, I have a certain knowledge of what of Pakistan, and I manage a European Studies program at the University of Karachi and the Area Study Center. That's why I met Tehsin, who was a brilliant student at that time, and that allowed me to get somehow in touch to grasp the essence of this Kashmir problem. So, and what I try to put this into my paper, or my non-paper. Well, let's start in any case, as time is running. So, first of all, has already been said, the present situation, which is not, after 1 year, there is not an improvement. This nightmare is continuing. and is even aggravating in respect to what we have seen in the previous year. This is something which has already been underlined by the previous intervention. And this situation reminded me a famous statement by Immanuel Kant, the German Prussian philosopher, who at the end of his brilliant career and life wrote this essay on how to set up a treaty, to establish a treaty for perpetual peace, because his bitter initial reflection was that perpetual peace was in that time only that of cemeteries and church yards. But this situation reminded me of the darkest period of European history. So it's so grave, so serious, this situation, that reminded me what Europe lived in the 20th century. So the 20th century, and more precisely between 1914 and 1945. A tragedy, but a tragedy which for a significant number of its countries continued for another 45 years and ended just in the 80s, in end of the 80s. So what have been the main elements of this strategy? Well, in any case, from this strategy, we learned that disintegration of political and economic systems generates kind of miseries. Because in this period, we saw the end of the Belle Époque, and then we have the tragedy of World War I. Then we have seen the rise of fascism, the rise of Nazism, which led to World War II. A series of isms which have something in common. Something in common in nationalism. And nationalism has been evoked by several of the speakers, if not all of them. Is a ghost which is present in this discussion. So, and Europe produced this ghost. Let's call them authoritarianism, fascism, Nazis, communism. But at the end of World War II, we learned that, disintegration and of political and economic system generates miseries. So we look for integration, called union in diversity, so which is a far-reaching concept. So let's come to India. So already Modi's BJP enjoy consensus. Enjoy a consensus which is gained through democratic election. This is true, but it's not. Even if true, this is worrying. Democracy has produced something of which we must be somehow scared. In Modi's nationalism, I find the two characters which are particularly relevant to explain 5 August: centralization of power and cultural intolerance, which is common, characteristic of nationalistic ideas, nationalistic thoughts. So regional autonomy is seen something as detrimental to the imposition of a single thought, which is the aim of nationalistic views. Nationalists do not accept diversities. nationally propose a single soul, which stands from the state, a single ethics, a state ethics, which has to be accepted by all. All from the state, all for the state. This was a saying which was circulating in Italy during the fascism. So it's not really promising, because if we find such a logic again today. All this is conflicting with the various declarations of human rights, from the French Revolution to the EU Charter, which put the individual at the center of the scene, not the state, the protection of the individual, the protection of the identity of the individual. So, well, here I provide an example of this form of nationalism that we see now in India, related with religion freedom, or better, the due respect to the believer of different religion. Modi has chosen the date of 5 August to lay the foundation stone in, I don't know if I pronounce it correctly, Ayodhya Uttar Pradesh temple, which is a temple with a long history, but is something which is divided. Now I don't enter into the details of this issue, but in any case, both Modi and his party have for years made the temple of Ram a symbol of Indian identity to unite Hindus. But the problem is he's uniting against Muslims. There's nothing wrong in uniting on looking for a symbol of identity, but this identity should coexist with other identities, what the nationalists do not accept. So, and this is a decision against the Muslims, who number around 200 million. So it's a minority, because India has 1 billion or something more than 1 billion, but 200 million is a minority with a huge critical mass. So the dangers in this position, in these acts, are really very, very strong. So then the other national reform passed. Well, now concerning the state of human rights in Kashmir, well, I found a very long and detailed explanation, indication of this in this annual review of human rights published by the Association of Parents of Disappeared Persons. And out of here, I took 2 examples. 2 examples because they shocked me in a certain sense. Not only because they are against, let's say, the EU Charter of human fundamental rights, but also because they are quite affecting one side human dignity, and on the other side religion freedom, which I consider that are 2 very fundamental pillars of human rights. So, because human dignity is at the top of the EU Charter. And in Article 1, we read human dignity is inviolable, must be respected and protected. So what happened in the report? A serious case of sexualized torture and gender violence were reported post-August 5. A case of torture from Mohammed Yassin and 11 other men were detained during the cordon and search operation and tortured. They were stripped naked and kept in a queue on the main road. All of them were electrocuted in their genitals. When the physical torture ended, they were made to lie face down on top of each other in a pile. This seems to be an extreme violation of human dignity. Then, according to Article 10 of the EU Charter, everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. And again, we read in a report, no prayers allowed in the historic, mosque. So complete lockdown. And also during months of Ramadan, congregational prayer were not allowed. So there is enough for, let's say, representing another huge violation of freedom of religion, which in any case is not just, we find not just in the Charter of, the new Charter of Fundamental Rights, but in the other Declaration of Human Rights, one of the Council of Europe, for instance, just to. Now, we come to a crucial question, which has already been raised. What could do the Europe? Had the EU any mean to reduce such a violence? Well, my answer, I mean, is not so promising. Not so, let's say, optimistic. Well, let's start from this way. The last pronouncement of the EU on German Kashmir issue goes back to 30 September 2019, almost 1 year ago, when the High Representative Federica Mogherini, so the previous Commission, met with the Indian Foreign Minister. And what was the outcome? Europe repeat incessantly here, litany, peaceful solution, bilateral dialogue, avoid escalation. Europe always repeat this, faced to this international crisis. Intentional good, in a certain sense, is an expression of soft power. The first expression of this soft power with the Barcelona Declaration 95. We know what happened after. So the one who started Mediterranean policy should have created a world of justice, democracy, freedom, respect of human rights in the Mediterranean area. We know history after 95. So the last example is a position reiterated even in these days on the Libyan issue. The same that we said, that Mogherini said no to the foreign minister. Peaceful solution, diplomatic solution, avoid escalation. And we know how things are going on in Libya. So the result is that Turkey, I remind that I'm talking from Turkey, and I'm teaching in university here in Turkey since a few years. Sorry, I've lost my. So that Turkey became the best allied of Sarraj, is providing to Sarraj what Sarraj needs, so weapons, and have put Europe in a corner. So, conclusion. Well, going back to Kashmir, I think that the EU could be seen as an example by countries who are facing problems that Europe had to cope with in the aftermath of World War II. Faced with economic disintegration of the 30s, Europe chose economic integration and form a political union. Europe went for union in diversities, because Europe respects diversities. It's a form of federalism, and we managed to create a space of peace, freedom, and justice. Second conclusion, when the fall of the Iron Curtain allowed it, we put an end through the fifth enlargement to the unnatural partition of the European continent Western Europe and Oriental Europe. Years before, always a consequence of the fall of communism, Germany put an end to its unnatural partition between East and West Germany. So the 1947 partition of the Indian subcontinent into India and Pakistan led to a war, which be under the form of high-intensity war or low-intensity war has been going on for more than 70 years, so 73 to be exact. I was born in that year. That's why I know exactly the number of years. So, last point of my conclusion, we might put the question how European integration and the lesson from Franco-German detente could be replicated in case of India and Pakistan, and how can Kashmir and its suffering be put to an end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Angelo. Your European perspective and linking fascist ideology of Modi in South Asia to previous European nationalist ideologies is really well taken. And you fear the risk of disintegration of political and economic system, which can result in generating further miseries for the people of Kashmir. So Indian nationalism you mentioned is mixed with doses of populism, and you also suggested us that we should learn from other examples. And human dignity you mentioned is always at the top of European Union Charter, but what is lacking is the transmission mechanism for the third world countries. And you also highlighted that European Union official pronouncement of this issue. And finally, you recommended that how European integration and lessons of France, Germany, Detente can be replicated in case of India and Pakistan, and how European Union and world civil society do efforts to end sufferings of the Kashmiris. Now I request that we are having number of panelists who would like to ask you questions. So I request Wes to moderate. There are few questions from the panelist side, and then I ask my worthy speakers if they have any question. Over to Wes, please.
Can I, please? May I?
Ji.
Yes, sure, Dr. Lal.
Ji.
Yes, Dr. Raf, you can ask a question.
Thank you very much. I have actually two questions. Thank you, Professor, for this very amazing introduction to the topic. And I remember that always I had discussions with my supervisor, Professor Maffettoni, concerning the understanding and misunderstanding of Europeans to the particularities of East peoples, like Iraqi people, Arab in general, Indians, Pakistanis. And I would really ask Professor if your understanding, do you believe that the European Union position, whether collectively or individually as a state, as member states of European Union, their position is based on the understanding, real understanding to the particularities or misunderstanding to the particularities of Kashmir and Jammu crisis? The second is...
let me answer one by one.
Okay.
Could you, because then I forget, it's just a question of, no. Oh, I don't think that there is a huge, deep knowledge of the particularities of the situation in Jammu and Kashmir. I guess what Barbara Gallo, she reminded that as journalists that the media do not pay so much attention. I found just a media which paid attention to Le Monde. but it's the only one in the European panorama. No, the European institution, as I was telling you before, they propose always the same therapy faced to all kind of international problem. No, diplomatic solution, political solution, dialogue, and so on and so on. But this is an aspirin, which is good for so many, but is not decisive in any for any therapy. So this understanding, unfortunately, doesn't exist. But if would exist, I wonder what Europe could do, because also you mentioned in your intervention, you said, okay, external intervention cannot be accepted. So I think that India and Pakistan have to be protagonists of this solution. We could provide some ideas, some suggestions, but then the two have to really sit at a table and try to find a common solution. The second question?
Yeah, thank you, Professor. The second question is, but before the second question, yeah, of course, media highlight and shed lights on some cases and, of course, transfer knowledge to the people. And the people, of course, in democratic societies, such as in Italy or in other European countries, media can create public opinions towards specific international cases, and that's what create a pressure towards the governments. But at the same time, the government itself has its own links and channels to have the knowledge, and for the knowledge for the purpose of decision-making process. And that was my question, not about in terms of public opinions, in terms of real government's agendas towards this kind of crisis, which is, of course, has consequences on international peace and security. And the second question, which is...
Well, if I may add a comment. Yes, the European Union also tried to go beyond the trade in its economic relations with third countries, talking about association agreements, or think also to neighborhood policy, which implied political dialogue. Also in the Mediterranean agreement, this part, so there is this attempt by Europe to use its soft power through diplomacy, through at EU level, through diplomacy by member states, to through this form of soft intervention to give some instruments, some ideas, some help to solve these problems. But it seems that governments on the other side, they are not available to listen to what can be suggested by European institutions, European governments.
Thank you, sir. If anybody else have a question, they can ask it right now.
Please, the second question, which is,
yeah,
if I can, yes, please. The second question is that from the introduction of the professor, I would understand that maybe he would encourage a scenario of bilateral solution that's based on finding let's say, an establishment mechanism that creates links between India and Pakistan. So, in other words, the solution will not see the light if not these powers, big powers like India and Pakistan, sit really together and equally on the freely and equal basis find the best way of their cooperation, not only in terms of Kashmir, but on the future of their peoples. Do you agree with this scenario?
Yes, I agree totally with this scenario. So thinking to the positive, example of the European integration, we created this big economic power, which is the single market, which gave us, let's say, prosperity. These instruments, starting from these instruments, we also developed instruments political cooperation. This is a model which somehow could be proposed to the attention of the governments of India and Pakistan. But the issue is that nationalism is very deaf to these things.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. Ambassador Khalid Mahmood has a question. Ji, Ambassador sir.
Yeah. It's not a question, it's an observation. See, whenever this Kashmir issue is raised with the European countries, one hears the same response that let the parties meet and they try to solve the problem. I'm not against bilateral negotiations, but I just want to remind that under the UN Charter, Article 33, bilateral negotiation is only one of the methods for pacific settlement of disputes. There are so many other methods, that is conciliation, negotiation is one, of course, arbitration, judicial settlement. So why always emphasis only on bilateral negotiations? Of course, Pakistan has tried this course also, but more than 40 summit level meetings have taken place between India and Pakistan with no result. So when the bilateral negotiation avenue fails, I think the international community should press the parties to adopt other means which are enumerated in the UN Charter. Second, my observation is that don't you think this is just an alibi for not taking any firm actions, One should recall that the tragedy of World War II took place because of the appeasement policy adopted towards, Nazi Germany and Italy. Is the international community, particularly the big powers, not repeating the same mistake in Kashmir, that they are not confronting the situation, they are not trying to confront the party which is not agreeing to any solution. On the other hand, rather it is committing all kinds of violations of human rights as documented by so many human rights organizations, including the Human Rights Council Commissioner. So I think this is, one will regret, I hope not, that by not confronting the erring party, but only appeasing that party, one could repeat the same experience as happened, which led to the World War II. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any other question? Any other question? Wes, is there any other question?
No, ma'am. Not any question from the attendees. If any panelists have the question, they can ask it.
Okay. Could I possibly? I'm sorry for interrupting.
Yeah.
Is it hearable?
Yes, Dr. Tehseen.
All right. Okay. I would like to just comment on what Professor Santagostino had to say about, replicating the example of the Franco-German rapprochement and maybe a possibility of, just kind of imagining this kind of situation in South Asia. I don't think so. I think that there is a kind of big problem with regards to, how one can see the Franco-German case versus one can see the Indian and Pakistani case. India tries to be a big brother in South Asia. India wants to dominate. India wants to, just see itself as, a power with whom nobody can actually come equal to. So, and unfortunately, the United States has also signed a strategic partnership with India. So it's not playing a politics of equals, which is very detrimental to peace in South Asia. And regarding the European Union's role, also with regard to the Palestinian issue, it's not been very positive, because the idea of creating a quartet group involving Russia, China, US, and the EU, it could no longer really work. So I think that EU has, it is a normative power. It is very effective when it comes to, softer parts of diplomacy and exhibiting its normative power. But I think that there is, much needed on the part of EU to sort of, play a major bulwark in, conflict resolution, in, as far as resolution of very intractable conflicts such as that of Kashmir. So it's just the point that I wanted to make.
Professor, Dr. Angelo, would you like to say something?
Oh, well, just a few words, because I realize time is running, and other speaker. So, I mean, international, supranational institutions like our United Nations can prepare the framework, sort of regulatory framework as a guideline for the two parts, in this case, India and Pakistan, so that they can sit at a table with already something on the table, which is the indication by the international community, by the international institutions. And then it will be up to them. So I believe in bilateralism, but multilateralism can play an important role, because when you are part of a multilateral institution, you are committed to respect certain issues. And this is very important as a starting point. But it's a starting point, and then the solution has to be found among the two parts.
Thank you very much, Barbara. There must be some Wi-Fi connection issue. Zoom is working properly. We can all hear. So you can recheck your internet connection. So now I would like to have my final word. I would like to thank you, all of you, for joining us today and advocating the rights of Kashmiri brothers and sisters. Now the final recommendation, I request, I'll start with the final recommendation, and then I request all the speakers that if you would like to add some points, so that we finally draft a recommendation paper that how to settle this Kashmir issue. I'm also thankful to all the panelists who gave us a quite well elaborated research paper with certain solutions on Kashmir issue, which we are going to publish in next coming days. So the first of all, India needs to abide by the United Nations Security Council resolutions and should handle the issue to the Kashmiri right of self-determination. Kashmiris are deprived of human rights, and international civil society and media should raise voice against human rights violation. International and national forum needs to be engaged, academia, think tanks, media, and civil society to discuss peaceful solution through dialogue. finally, for global peace and security, what we discussed today, and for South Asian stability, it is very important that there should be a proper settlement of the Kashmir issue, and civil liberties rights should be given. My final recommendation is that we used to have confidence building measures in which the academia and think tanks and other social sector used to interact and have some kind of dialogues to develop some and to find out some solutions. So why not we work on track 2 diplomacy or some other new form of diplomacy to find out a solution? Because we mentioned about Second World War, so many years have passed, so we should come up with some new solution with some new challenges and with new world economic order. So I request all the worthy panelists to give their recommendation and the final view. So I start with Dr. Angelo, and then Barbara, then Tessin, and then Dr. Ilaf Hadi. And if Khalid Mahmood Sahab would like to join, he's welcome. Yes, Dr. Angelo, your final recommendation or any other point you would like to mention?
No, I don't have any further point as a final recommendation. I may just repeat what I said. So the framework has to be that of international institution providing guidelines for the solution of this. India is committed to respect of human rights because it's part of the United Nations. So, and this should be a precise starting point for bilateral talks with the Pakistani government. So. In any case, I want to I think that your initiative for this webinar, this discussion has been quite interesting, opportune. And so because contributed to raise the consciousness of the gravity of seriousness of this problem, which in Europe do not receive the appropriate weight and consideration at level of European Union, and also I have to say at level of the Italian government.
Thank you. Yes, Barbara, how you see that how media can play its role, and as a female activist, how you think? Please unmute your mic.
I think I am an activist, a journalist, so for me it's very important to share this information with the people, because it's true what Dr. Hadi told, that it's important, or Dr. D'Agostino told about the international government. Sorry. But
Ci tengo alla mia santità.
Same level. To be aware of the public opinion, both government and public opinion. It's about this topic, because it's true, in Italy no one knows about it, and the government too is nothing about this issue of Kashmir. But I think even the United Nations has to be more. Yes, the rule, the power to do more in this case, I think. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Dr. Tessin, what is your opinion?
Thank you, Amna. I think I would second as to what you said about coming back to track 2. I think that it could be a very, very useful and efficacious modus vivendi to sort of, find greater means, greater capacities, greater varieties of using multidisciplinary platforms in academia. In Europe, we say epistemic communities, scientific communities, knowledge-based communities. That is to say, universities, schools, colleges, educational institutions, think tanks, research, organizations, NGOs, INGOs. So I think that we should be really optimistic, because there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. We have to really, really, be the advocates of Kashmir. And as a diasporic Pakistani, I think that, the journey could be long, but we just begin with a single step. So as Mao Zedong said, that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And I think that it's been quite some time that I am also, in my individual capacity, have been advocating the cause for Kashmir. We have been, celebrating Kashmir Day in the public sphere here in Italy, in the center, near the train station. Sometimes we are holding placards. We are actually using the, microphones, and we are using loudspeakers to make people understand and make people be aware of how we can introduce the issue of Kashmir in the international public sphere. So I think that it's going to be not that easy, but I think the initiative that you have taken is going to go miles and miles. And the first step should be that we ourselves as Pakistani diaspora, how do we really translate this into action? So what kind of advocacy or campaign or counseling we can generate within the European public sphere when it comes to research, contributing research papers, contributing publications, contributing our opinions in opinion ads in newspapers, articles. It could be like collaboration projects dealing with intellectual scholars, students coming from various multidisciplinary international backgrounds. And of course, with Professor Sant'Agostino sitting in the University of Ankara, and Barbara Gallo sitting in very influential Institute of Research of Peace and Conflict Studies, Ilaf Hadi having his expertise and having a multiple level of diplomatic and social resources. I think it's all about social resourcing. So we just have to get started off in this, multiplying our social resources and then working on it and pacing it all together, lobbying actively and, advocating the cause of Kashmir. So I think that I've made my point. Thank you.
Yeah, well said. And over to Dr. Ilaf Hadi. What is your final recommendation?
Thank you. First, I would commend, of course, and second,
Yes, we can hear you.
okay. I would, of course, commend and second what Professor Angelo D'Agostino has just raised, which is the sustainable solution should be based first on bilateral agreement among the stakeholders. Second, the active participation of local, stakeholders, and of course, third, the international guarantee. The international actor should guarantee, could guarantee any agreement could see the light, but the endurance of any agreement depends on how much solid the ties could be built between Pakistan and India. That's the most important things here. So, and again, the rights, whether social or political or cultural rights of Kashmiri could be met in one way or another. This is the core of the process in Kashmir, in Jammu and Kashmir. So the recommendation, as I said, is bilateral sustainable solution should see the light as sooner as possible on the basis of equal and fair participation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. And I think this is the first step. We are planning another international conference. Maybe it's a webinar or a conference on 10th December, which is the International Human Rights Day, to raise our voice again and again. Inshallah, looking forward that if you have time to join us on 10th of December, because we need to raise our voice as a human being. And I think we need to write. We need more voices. We need more associates, and we need to lobby. What Dr. Tessin also said. So I'm really thankful to all of you, and let's hope that Kashmiris get their right of self-determination, and they get the basic rights of human rights and civil liberties. Thank you very much, all of you. Khuda Hafiz.